Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I want to talk about another big piece of the puzzle of why kids' learning and behavior struggles can sometimes be misinterpreted, and why it's really important to understand the different types of breakdown that can occur with learning disabilities and behavior issues, specifically to auditory processing. So often these kids, have poor focus and can seem disengaged or unmotivated, and they're working incredibly hard, and people are not recognizing that or just don't see it, right? It's not like no judgment. They just don't recognize what's really going on behind the apparent behavior or choices that they think this child is making. So, if your child is making these efforts and it's not being acknowledged, like everyone's just thinking they're just being lazy or need to focus better or try harder or pull up their socks, then they are going to at times check out, and they're going to it can often affect their self-esteem and make them just feel like there's no point in trying because nobody recognizes my efforts anyway. And so what I want to talk about is I want to give you a little snippet first, real quick, of what a lot of these kids are experiencing, because I think if we can understand what these kids are experiencing, then it's a lot easier to help them and see how hard their day is on a day-to-day basis. And so with reference to kids, so many of our kids who have auditory processing issues, I kind of got an experience of that when I was at a concert a few years ago, and the music was so loud that I was really looking forward to being able to have conversation with the people that I had gone to the concert with, and being able to catch up and so forth. And we really didn't get to do any of that. I just checked out. I felt like one of those kids because I checked out in terms of we had to yell. We literally had to yell in order to hear each other over the music, and even then half the information got misconstrued and so forth. And after a while I just thought, whatever, we'll just talk another time. I could not be bothered carrying on this conversation. And some of our kids, aren't conversational, or sometimes it's not that, or sometimes they are struggling in school and they just check out in school because it's too much work. It's too much, it requires too much strain on their auditory system and too much overwhelm. And so I really got a picture of what it is like to have auditory fatigue. And, I had a client who kind of could echo or be grateful that I could empathize when I gave him that example, because he realized that's what was happening to him all the time. And he didn't realize that's what was happening to him all the time. He thought I'm just stupid because he couldn't follow in class. There was too much, background and foreground noise. At the time, he didn't know that term. And this is what is known as auditory figure ground and auditory attention. And there was real breakdown in that area for him. And so he just checked out, and he was like 12 years old, and mom was getting really concerned because the behavior was starting to get worse and other things were starting to spiral out of control. And once we were able to address what was really going on, then you're no longer just focusing on, trying to improve the motivation and trying to improve their engagement and their focus and finding all these skills that are not going to they're not going to become engaged and focused if they actually have something like really functional going on in the brain that's making it really difficult for them to be able to focus because they can't decipher the background noise from the foreground noise. And once Sam and I and his mom were able to work on these issues from both a functional perspective in terms of addressing weak connections in the brain and strengthening those underdeveloped areas, and then also addressing the biochemical aspect that could be contributing to that, all of a sudden things got much better and he was able to learn. And his teachers actually were remarking how he had improved so much in school. So let me know in the comments below, do you see this? Do you see this with your child where, sometimes parents have a lot of guilt because they've accused their child of being lazy for, a while before they got their diagnosis, or disengaged, or they feel bad for their child because this is how it's misinterpreted at school or by other people in the community or family. And, what does this look like for your kid? And, what are you seeing and so forth? And do keep in mind with these kids, or with this can sometimes be mistaken as ADHD, and ADHD can definitely coincide with this, but sometimes these kids truly just have this breakdown with auditory figure ground processing and auditory attention, and it's misinterpreted as ADHD, and they're put on all this medication, when really what needs to happen is we need to strengthen those areas that are causing them to have difficulty, or have their brain having difficulty distinguishing the background and foreground noise, and fixing their attention on the important auditory information, or the relevant auditory information. And the same thing again can happen with sensory processing disorder. It can be a part of it, or sometimes be mistaken for it, when in fact what's really going on is auditory overwhelm. And these kids with sensory processing, and we see this with autism or just sensory processing disorder on its own, these kids are sometimes not as likely to shut down. Sometimes they do, but these kids are more likely to be overwhelmed. So then that's when you'll see the meltdowns, or the irritability, or the moodiness, or whatever that'll look like in your child, and also their age and emotional development. And I just want to add that sometimes we think these kids, it's not their auditory system that's weak, because parents will tell me, well, he loves hearing stories and he loves having stories read to them, and he understands it really well when he hears the story, so it can't be his auditory system that's weak. And what's important to know is that actually whenever you hear auditory information, it actually, or a story per se, it has to go through the visual system in your brain, because that's where you're making a movie or a picture in your mind in order to understand. And that actually occurs, the visual system is actually on the right side of the brain, which develops first during infancy, and the auditory system is on the left side of the brain. And it's actually a lot of our weak learners and so forth actually have a weak left brain, or what's called a left brain deficiency, and are relying heavily on their visual system because their auditory system has so many weaknesses and areas of breakdown. So that being said, we can develop the left side of the brain. We can strengthen that auditory system, and specifically strengthen the areas that are weak in terms of, is it auditory figure ground? Is it auditory attention? Next week, I'll be talking more about, on Thursday, I'll be talking specifically about, what areas can break down in terms of other areas and so forth, and what that can look like. So keep in mind, yes, you can improve this. This is not the end of the road, with certain exercises and cognitive therapies, and as always, addressing biological factors, which are so often overlooked in these situations. So if you like this video, please share. And as usual, I will post in the link or the comments below the link to my free starter kit, the Laser Focused Learner. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again soon.